Hello everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, based on the location you're joining us from. I hope and wish you and your family are safe in this pandemic. We have named this initiative as DESV, short form of Design and Verification. This initiative covers multiple series across design and verification topics. Most of the contents were developed in a collaborative manner and with the help of open source tools. These are the various series what we have thought to conduct, but not necessarily in the same sequence. People should know that the content creation takes a lot of time, effort and collaboration, and thus would not be available just soon after. We are trying our best to make as much content as possible in a short span of time, but please be patient. We'll communicate in details when and how subsequent sessions would be conducted. My name is Om and I hope you will appreciate the effort what we have placed in. Without any further ado, let's start our session. Either we are working on the design or development of standard cells, we are closely working with the technology libraries. Foundry provides us the technology data which details us on metal layers, its RC characteristics, the vias, terminals and design rule constraints. Technology data is similar concept as Legos. We identify basic building blocks that are needed to make different objects. Let us assume we are making a multi-story building and try to make an analogy with the technology data. Metal layers are like building floors, vias are like pillars of the building which connect different layers. DRC rules are like what is the height of the floor, spacing of the common area, etc. DRC provides rules how these metal layers, vias, etc. can be drawn and connected to ensure that the chip works fine. Terminals are like doors, it provides input and output access points. Foundry may additionally provide other ready-to-use building blocks or analog components such as IOs and pads. Let us take an example and visualize this. Let us assume this to be a layout of an NMOS. You can see different metal layers being used. You can imagine it to be a building, assuming each metal layer to be on a different floor. The via connects between floor and terminal allows us with an access. These individual blocks can then be instantiated and connected in an appropriate manner to achieve the desired functionality. By simply looking at the layout, can we say what logic function it implements? It is difficult. So we need to work at some higher level of abstraction which hides physical level details and still allows us to implement the desired functionality. Let us assume this is the circuit equivalent of the layout. This is more readable, but again, at one glance we cannot say what the combined functionality of this logic is. If we could work at some more higher level of logic abstraction, it would be desirable. This is where the hardware description language comes in. It allows us to handle complexity required as well as provides readability and helps in quicker debugs. The right hand side represents the HDL representation of the circuit. Clearly it is more readable. We can see the inputs, we can see the outputs, and again with the knowledge of HDL we know that it represents a D flip-flop. HDL allows us to design at various abstraction. It can be it a gate level, behavioral or a register transfer level. In case of gate level, the design is expressed as interconnection of primitive components. Basically, all the primitive components as defined by the HDL language are used to create a structural view of the design. In case of behavioral, this is mostly used for modeling of the design for verification purpose. The HDL language can have constructs which are not synthesizable. The behavioral model can use those constructs. The behavioral models are not intended for synthesis or downstream flows. Register transfer level. This is the level in which most of the designs are coded. Design is expressed at a lower level in terms of registers and combinational logic glued between them. This is an open source Verilog simulator. It can support all of the Verilog constructs and some of the system Verilog constructs as well. iVerilog can be used to dump VCD files which we will be analyzing using GTK Wave. GTK Wave is an open source waveform viewer. It supports a variety of formats, but mostly we'll be using the VCD formats. There is one more open source tool named Verilator. It supports synthesizable portion of Verilog and system Verilog constructs. It assumes the design to be in Verilog or system Verilog construct, but the test bench has to be written in system C or C++. User needs to write a C++ wrapper to instantiate the compiled model of the design. These are a couple of Python-based design and verification tools which are open source. Couple of them are in development and some of them are in advanced stages. You can refer to them if you wish to have a look. We would use Verilog HDL to demonstrate most of the examples. This is mainly because of our exposure towards Verilog. If someone is interested to try with the VHDL codes, they're open to do so, and if they can share the codes back with us, we would be happy to include them as well. So what is the intention of this lab? So the intention is like we will give some basic commands what you can use to try your sample codes like Verilog codes and Verilog test benches, so that you can experiment it and try to learn Verilog or the design concepts with yourself. The commands as such, like even if you are using an open source tool or a commercial simulation or a synthesis tool, the concept remains the same. The command arguments may differ across open source and the commercial tools, but the intention of what you want to provide to a tool should mostly remain the same. So let us take this example. So here on the left, so on the left side you can see like this is a Verilog design of a counter. So it increments the count value by 1 when the reset is like deasserted, and this is the active low reset. And right hand side you see a simple model of a test bench in which we have a clock generator between line 6 to 9, and then this is a reset assertion and deassertion logic, where the reset is asserted in line 12 and then reset is deasserted in line 14. What I mean by assertion and deassertion are the inactive active and inactive values of reset, not like the actual logical value of the reset. So when I say assertion of reset, because this reset is negative edge, so I mean like the value driven as 1 tick B0. Yeah. So this test bench basically there is a clock which is like half cycle of 5, so basically a clock period of 10. It starts with a value of 0, so you will see a 0, and then after 5 time unit based on the time scale of the simulation, you will see an active edge and the clock follows the waveform. The reset at the start of the simulation, you will see this we have assigned 1 tick B0. By default registers, like if you see REG, this reg default value is X at the time of declaration. So you will see a you might see a you will definitely see a edge here, but whether this always block will capture or not, that depends on the race. We'll cover race later. But for the demonstration of this lab, we'll assume that this particular line will cause a reset, and this block is able to sample that reset, and then after 40 time unit the reset is deasserted, and then we run simulation further for 100 time unit, and then simulation is stopped. Since we are using open source tool, this particular part of the code initial begin like line number 19 to 22 basically enables the simulator to dump the signal transitions in a VCD format. This VCD format will be using to analyze the waveforms. And then this is the place where we have instantiated the counter logic here. So this is the design under test. We have passed the appropriate IOs based on the signals present in the test bench. So if you see here, we have iverilog counter.v, and so basically this is the tool what we are saying, like this iverilog is a Verilog simulator which has a couple of command line arguments. One of them is like -o. So -o redirects the simulator executable name to any name what you choose. For this case, we have assumed our executable to be named as sim_exec. So what we have done here, we have taken two like our design and test bench files, passed it to iverilog, and then we have redirected the simulator executable to a name of sim_exec. When we execute this line on the cell, we would get a executable in the same directory with this name. We can then execute this executable. This creates the VCD file what we have seen here, basically this tv_counter.vcd file. So that's the VCD file we are passing as an argument to GTK web. When we run this last GTK web command, a waveform comes up. What we have tried to do here is like on the first window section which I am highlighting, this is a hierarchy window in which you can see that TB counter is the top level of our simulation, and in which we have instantiated a counter within it. So this I counter is the instantiation of that. So if you see this, so this TV counter is highlighted, and then when you highlight this, the respective signals will be seen on the left, the below left section of this. Yeah. So here if you see, this TV counter has three signals, like two are reg because test bench generates the clock and reset, so it's a like reg type, and then wire is an output from the I counter, so we have declared a wire just to sample the value from the counter. We have selected all this and clicked on the append to add it to the waveform window. So this window appears. So if you have noticed that I have mentioned earlier, the initial value of the clock starts from 0, and after 5 the clock starts toggling, and the period of that is 10. So this particular markers indicate 10 time units. Again, we have not specified any time scale, so tool would have taken a default time scale. In this case, I see the default time scale to be second. Yeah, but user can specify time scale from the command line arguments as well as from the test bench, so whichever is feasible for them. If you see here, we had an active low reset, so reset was asserted here. So the moment the reset gets deasserted, the count gets cleared to like 0, and then if you see after 40 we had deasserted the reset. So 10, 20, 30, 40, this is the time where the reset is deasserted. After deassertion of reset, since our design is synchronous, the next update to the count would only happen at the positive edge of the clock. So the count after deassertion of reset, the else part of the logic would get triggered, and the count next count value would be 0 plus 1. That would, because we have taken an incrementer of 1 in that in our example. So that would get updated here in case of simulator, but in case of actual synthesis netlist, based on the gate delays, it can be slightly delayed. But the actual update to the output of the flop would take place on the positive edge of the clock. And you see this sequence continuing, like it increments every cycle. So let us go through some of the design recommendations, or like these recommendations are freely mostly available on the web, but what we have tried to is make it streamlined so that we have a single place to refer it. So let's discuss a brief about RTL, like not specifically how the RTL coding is done, but in general what is the philosophy we try to like when can a like when is the expected bug fixes costly and some similar to that. So basically we get the at the start of the design cycle the spec, then an idea is the one which actually drives the entire process. Then idea will be translated to a specification, and then that idea will be taken by the architecture team. The architecture team will take the spec, which can be a feedback from a customer, or can a market research, or can be a like a patented to be patented idea as well. So that idea is consumed by the architecture team. That architecture team now creates a blocks, or like what you call it, the architecture level view. Architecture level view is nothing but a block diagram in which it defines what each block does and how these blocks are interconnected together to actually implement the overall idea. The architecture team also assumes or comes like provides some other specifications, such as what is the area requirement for this, what frequency should it run, and what power should it consume. So once this architecture document is ready, this is again sent across to different functional design verif teams. So RTL team will take that architecture document and implement those respective blocks as described by the specification. Meanwhile, the verif team will also take that architecture specification and create test plan to validate all the scenarios as described by the architecture spec. When the design is ready, it would be delivered to the functional verif team. Functional verif team, as per the test plan, they try to cover all the scenarios, and if any bug exists, it will be passed on back to the designer. So you can see this is like a closed loop, as well as the debugs are actually happening in the same format in which we are coding our RTLs. So it's very easy, and then the turnaround time is very fast here. Once the design is verified, like functionally verified for all the possible tests, like whatever the verif test plan covers, it is passed to the synthesis, like synthesis tools. Synthesis will then try to run synthesis on that, and like synthesis is a time consuming process. You have much more collaterals present here, like you have to have constraints, you have to have all the specification driven like goals like area, power, and all has to be translated for this, and all has to be fit to the the synthesis tool. Synthesis tools will then run the synthesis, and then if all the goals are met, then it goes to backend. But if all goals are not met, there can be many ways to we can either fine tune the constraints or the goal itself. Suppose the architecture spec expectation is like way off, then we might need to just talk to the architecture team, or the feedback again goes to the architecture, and then it decides. But then in most cases there are, if the violation is not so huge, and there are certain tools options also which we can enable. Various tools allow different retiming, pipelining, other options which can help in timing fixes. Yes, but if that is not possible, and then there is major design change required, then it again goes back to the designer. The designer tries to fix that, and then again it follows the same process. Even for a small change, it has to again go through the functional verification, because we don't want any other thing to break. So we make sure that all the functional intent is proper, and then it again passes through this functional verification and then synthesis. So you can see this is a very long loop. Even for a small change, it goes to like designer, then a functional verif team, and then comes back. So we say that this loop is basically very long and costly because it takes manpower, time, and all kind of stuff. But then again, this is at least good if you compare, like if a design is returned from the backend, because that's pretty much worse, because again you have to follow all the previous sequence. So what we say that the issues which are discovered late is very costly and time consuming. So we have to make sure that our design is complete, the functional verification is complete, and synthesis constraint goals whatever we have mentioned actually mimics the actual requirement. If any of them are off, then there can be holes which can be caught later and which can be very costly. One more thing to note here, after a synthesis is run, there can be a gate level simulations as well to make sure that whatever functional verification we have done, like the same test plan, to make sure the intent whatever we validated here is actually met here. There are other functional verification tools as well which can take in the RTL and the netlist and then make sure that the RTL and the functional like synthesis netlist are equivalent. So yeah, so we like there are a lot of tools which tries to achieve one philosophy. The intent is retained across transformation. So wherever the design undergoes a transformation, suppose like from RTL to netlist, or from netlist to a mapped netlist, or like placed netlist, routed netlist. So we have to make sure that the functionality doesn't change. The functionality what we have actually coded remains the same. So there are a lot. So we use a lot of tools. Yeah, and then most of the tools are commercial tools. But then yes, because for our learning exercise we might not use commercial tools, but when you get a hands-on on a commercial project, or like access to your office work, you can try it on your own, and then yeah, and you will know all the details. Okay, this slides basically tries to bring to your notice is the LRMs for Verilog or VHDL or any other tool can have multiple interpretations of the same code. The code what we write can be viewed differently by the different tools. What happens in that case is, if a simulator assumes one view, and then our functional verif team takes, like, the functional verification takes a lot of time, like it's 30 to 40 or sometimes even 60% of the entire design cycle. So after 60% of the cycle, and then we go to a backend or synthesis and we find out that our view was not correct, then it becomes very difficult for us to validate that view. So most likely we have to follow guidelines. So we should know what are the best practices, what we should do, more than what we should do, what we should not do. That's more important to know, because there are known failures with respect to that, and if you don't do those, at least we are trying to avoid common known mistakes which already is like debugged and very costly. Okay, now what we can do to avoid, like, some simulator can give one view of that, the other simulator can give a different view. So sometimes you might have always noticed, like, when you run from one tool, you get the correct behavior what you thought, but suddenly when you run the same code and test bench in different tool, you get failures. Both are correct, because in simulators, in case of that LRM ambiguities, the simulators are often allowed to choose any one of the possible interpretations, and it can so happen that the interpretation what you chose was working for you, but the interpretation what the different tool chose was not working for you. So how do we deal with that? The deal is basically in the RTL itself. Like, we have to know where the ambiguity exists, and we have to code in such a way that even in any case the ambiguity should not reflect, or our code should be immune to those ambiguities. Ambiguities most often leads to race, but we'll see a lot of other, like, race feed throughs, like how are the inferences happening through this section to understand even more. So what is race? Race, as I told you, like it refers to ambiguity. So from the LRM or okay, when I say LRM is language reference manual for like Verilog or any other language. So for them from the LRM, you for there can be a possible multiple different interpretations, and then like I discussed this, different EDA tools can choose one like one interpretation over the other, and even the same tool across revisions, you might see that okay, they have exhibited a different behavior in the previous revision but a new behavior in this revision. That is also possible because the tool might have been upgraded to a different interpretation or different view. So let us see some like what are those ambiguities and tries to fix them. So one of the ambiguities are like the scheduling of the assign and always blocks. So we say that the Verilog LRM states that they happen concurrently and then there is no fixed code order. So if you have coded like this, it doesn't ensures that okay, line number 8 will be executed before line number 10 to 15 this block of code is executed. It's no guaranteed. So scheduler, a tool can even choose to schedule this before this or this before this, like similar like all this. Now similar in even this is applicable to always block and always initial block. So all the respective blocks are independently scheduled without even taking care of what signal it uses and like uses and like any other things. So if you see this, in this case we are trying to update a value of y from an input a and b, and then we are trying to consume the same value in the same time unit. Basically again in the RTL code we don't use any time hash like time delays, explicit delays coded, because that is not synthesizable, and then is also not recommended because synthesis tool, even if you have made your RTL which is functionally verified using a functional verification tool, if you run lint or synthesis it will flatly fail because your assumptions of a circuit working with certain delays are not correct. It should not be there because the methodology is to use a synchronous design and you have to assume that all the event updates occur with respect to positive edge of the clock. So in this design we don't have a clock, so we assume that all the code gets updated within the same time unit. So this y gets updated in the same time unit, and then we are trying to read this y here, use this y like, so we are trying to write and then again a read. Now in a case where this gets executed first followed by this, you will see a value of y, and again based on the change of b and c, you can see the if b and c changes, then you can see that this value of y is taken into account and then z gets computed. This particular line of code has one other demerit because it models a latch because we have not updated all this sensitivity list doesn't encompasses all the variables, but that's the second that we'll discuss later. But as of for this purpose of this slide, we are trying to write get a value of y which updates here and then trying to consume the value of y in the same cycle. What if line number 10 to 15 gets executed first followed by this? Now when line number this gets executed, this will take the older value of y, and then when line number 8 executes, this will update the value of y, but since y was not present in the sensitivity list, this would not even get triggered, and this can cause a like ambiguity. So there are multiple ways to do this. One simplest way is to have this y here, or you can use always at star, or if you are using system verilog always underscore com, yeah, all kind of that stuff you can use. Now what happens if you use y here? Let us take both the cases. In one case, let us assume that this line gets executed first and then this gets later. In this case, y gets updated. Since y gets updated, this if this is present in the sensitivity list, this block gets triggered, and then the updated value of y is used. In the other case, when this gets triggered first followed by this, we take the older value of y, compute all this, and then this block gets triggered. It again updates the value of y, but since y is in the sensitivity list, this block will again get recomputed, and then we will take the z will will be computed based on the updated value of y. Now we see that race still exists. Like in one case there are two blocks which get executed. In the other case there are three blocks which are like one block gets executed twice and the other, but there is no ambiguity of the result. The result remains the same. So if we add this to part of this, the ambiguity, whatever we are talking like race is ambiguity, that ambiguity is resolved. So basically Verilog recommends using always at star. So if you use star here, basically it means that by default tool will infer all the read-in variables to be part of the sensitivity list. System Verilog has introduced like different always keywords. For the purpose of this you can use always underscore com, and when you use the system Verilog construct always com or always latch, it doesn't change the behavior of always. The tool tries to based on your like providing of information that it's always com or always latch, it will try to infer that intent, and if the intent is wrong it will flag an error saying that you tried to infer this as a combo circuit, but based on your coding structure or the behavior it is inferring into a latch or some other circuit. So that helps in again a quicker debug, because you will get the errors during the simulation itself, the start of the simulation itself, correct? So then it helps in debug, and yeah, but in case of Verilog it's always recommended not to manually list that and then use star here, so that by default tool will infer all the the right hand side or the read-in variables in the sensitivity list. Okay, so this is read write trace. This here we are trying to see a sequential two sequential blocks. So we have a flop d in S1 and we have a flop called d out. But if you see, we have used a blocking statement. So what it means, okay, so in a cycle both this always block will get executed. When this happens, d let us assume the sequence of the block number 10 executes before block number 14. In that case, d gets updated to d in S1 first, and since it is a blocking, it will be updated in the same time stamp, and then the update, because we are saying that the block number 14 was scheduled later than this, the updated value of d in will be used for assigning to d out. So if you see in that same cycle, you see the d in propagating to d out. Now let us take a case where block number 14 got scheduled before block at line number 10. In that case, if you see, this d in was assigned to d out, and then we go back here, and then d in S1 is assigned to d out, and then when you go back to block number 10, the input port d in is assigned to d in S1. So if you see here, we have already so in this case you see a different behavior, because this triggered is based on edge. When the edge occurred, both the blocks scheduling can happen. Now depending on order of this, in one case you will see d out as a d in the other case you will see the d out as d in S1, which is the previous value of d in. So there can be a sequential race here. So and then what we the recommendation is to use a non-blocking statement, so that the ambiguity doesn't exist. In this case there is ambiguity. In one case you see a pipeline behavior, in one case you don't see a pipeline behavior. So if you use a non-blocking statement, in this case, like if you update this with a non-blocking with this operator basically, then you can see that it will represent only one behavior irrespective of which block is scheduled before the other. So, and that will be the pipeline behavior. this is write trace. Okay, okay, so the variables are allowed to be written from different always blocks. Variables, when I say variable, I mean reg. So reg type can be assigned in different always block. And let us assume the intent here was we have two request interface, request 1 and request 2, and then its acknowledgement ACK1 and ACK2. And this is just a monitor module which monitors and updates a flag called busy. So this request 1 and so the design on like the block 10 to 15 says that okay, basically when the request and acts are not equal, we say that we are processing something, and then if both are equal, we say we are not busy. Since we have two interface, there are two always block with exactly like similar logic, but both are driving the same busy signal out. Now again there is a race here. If the line number 10 block gets executed first, followed by line number 17, and both are supposed to be combo logic, like combinational circuit, correct? So we are like followed all the guidelines saying that we have used star and everything. But then if you see this, if this block gets executed, and in this case assume that request 1 and ACK1 was not same. So if it was not same, we would have set this busy to 1. Then this block gets executed. In this case assume that request 2 and ACK2 was actually same. Then the busy then this busy signal what we had set to 1 here gets overridden with a value of 0. And again this can happen even if the like line number 17 block gets scheduled before this, when they have conflicting value to update. So basically we have seen that if we update a variable from a two different always block, there can be a write trace. Both of those are trying to update a value, but the block which gets scheduled later will be the final value what the next logic would see. So again there is ambiguity here. We cannot predict which block would occur first. So what do? There are multiple ways. One way is to use a temporary signal called BC1 and BC2 and then like do it like this. So what we are saying, this block gives its own busy and this block gives its own busy, and then we OR it based this OR and again this is based on the functionality what you choose. Now since we are trying to assert busy when any of these are high, so it's a OR functionality, but you may choose to like do it differently as well. This is one way. The other way, you could even move this logic to part of, so this can be the first one, and then the second this basically you remove this always block and then have this entire request 1 ACK1 or request to ACK2 in the same if statement and then create a busy there. So there are multiple ways, but the idea is not to assign a variable from a different always block, because in that case there can be a write trace. We have shown an example here with always. There can be an example with assign, but assign, you know that when you have two assign statements means like it is continuously driven. What I mean with continuously driven is it is like connected to a wire. Any change is seen always. So what happens if I have two assign statements to the same wire? Unless they are assigning a same value, it will be shown. But the moment one of the value changes, like one wire is trying to drive an 0, the other wire is trying to drive an x, you will get an x, and then it can be caught very easily. But in case of always or yeah, that, so it is like not a wire, it is not continuously driven, it is a procedural block. So always the reg types behaves like a variable. So it in simulation you will not see access here, you will always see the last updated value of the variable, and thus it becomes very difficult to debug. So this code might, in RTL if you write this, it's a flat no. The synthesis tool will give, or the lint tool will give you an error, but test benches can have these kinds of code and you have to be careful how you use it. There can be scenarios where you have mutually exclusive conditions which enables this or this, but then if that is the case, it's better to write within the same always block. Okay, So this is the always initial race. Again, simulator says the always and initial can also be scheduled in any order. There is no guarantee that it will follow the code order. Now we have seen this example. This is exactly same example, and we have seen the waveform in the previous slide, and this actually worked for our case. But let us have a look at line number 11 to 16 here. What we have tried to do here is we have tried at the start of simulation, we have tried to make reset as one tick B0. So, and this reset is active low. So we have tried to assert that reset at the start of the simulation. Now this assertion will happen because at line number 3 you see like reset as a reg, which by default is an with default it will be an X. So if so when you assign this to one tick B0, any X to 0 transition is considered as negage. Now there is a catch here. Now we know that the negage would occur, but what if this scheduling of always and initial is not in the manner in which we expect? Now from our perspective, if this initial happens is scheduled before this always block, then this negage occurs. This negage would get will get that trigger, and then this will update the value to be like 0. And if you go back and see the waveform, you actually see that in this particular example with the tool what we have seen, this was the behavior, but this behavior is not guaranteed. What if this always was scheduled before the initial? Then what would happen in that same time unit? It would not see this reset edge, and then it would try. So basically it will not reset this count, and then in the timestamp the edge would subsequently come. So basically it will miss that edge, and then this count will not get resetted to a reset value. So there is again ambiguity here. We are relying on the tool to like sequence this order, like this initial to happen before this. So how do we fix this? So one, like there are multiple ways in Verilog if you want to do this. So what we are trying to do here is, because we know that this is simulator at the time 0 when we are trying to do this both gets scheduled at time 0. So there is a race between which this block gets scheduled first or this block gets scheduled first. So what generally, if you see, or in most of the examples in open source codes or the designs, what you see, we'll assert a non-reset or a non-active, we'll assign reset to a non-active value first, and followed by any small delay. The delay can be any small, because we just want to move away from that 0 timestamp and then assert the reset so that this will take care. So if you see this, what we have tried, so since it was a negative age reset, we have assigned a reset at time 0 to a non-active value, and then after some delay we have tried to reset this. We have tried to assert the reset and then follow the same sequence. Now this guarantees that even if at time 0 there was a race, subsequently we'll reset our design. So this allows the ambiguity, because unless we reset our design, we are not expected to function. So this is the point where we say that okay, we are out of reset, and then the behavior is consistent here. But if we remove this code, at this point the behavior was not consistent. If the counter was reset, then we would have seen a value of 0, 1, 2, 3. But if the count was not reset, we would see X's throughout the simulation. System. Okay, so this is the waveform. If you see it, so if you see till 15 it was non-active value. On 15 we asserted the reset, the count value got resetted, and after like 40 we try to deassert the reset, and then it starts counting here. So that is the case. So system Verilog allows a different system, because this was an ambiguity in Verilog. So we fix this ambiguity in Verilog with having this kind of code. But system Verilog allows one different. The ambiguity resulted because we were trying to see a value of 0 at the time of simulation. Like so like what I mean to say here is a value of reset when assigned via initial and always block always happens during simulation. What Verilog states that if you assign a value of 1 tick v0 in that during this what you call declaration, then this assignment to 0 will happen much before the simulation. It will like just before the start of the simulations, all the declaration with assignments will occur. So in this case, you will not even see a value of x on reset. It will always start with a value of 0 followed by 1 and 0 and like this. So this also allows us to remove the ambiguity, because we know that on the start of the simulation it will be 0, and if you want to create an edge, it has to be again gone to a non-active value followed by an active value. So this also allows because if we use Verilog, then again we see a edge yeah. So in case of Verilog, if you assign a value of like suppose this line number 12 was 1 tick b0, you will see a edge here because reset was x and then this was 0 here. But if you write this line reset equal to 1 tick b0 here and again reset equal to 1 tick b0 here, you will not even see a neg edge on the start of the simulation. So these are the general guidelines what we have discussed across previous slides. You can try to like think through this. Like this might seem like a one-liners, but try to think through this, why this was written. You can like try to infer what this means based on the examples what we have discussed. And if you're not clear still why this is needed or what, if we use this, what issues can come, we can you can send me a link like a post or something, and I'll be able to or you can update the discussion forum and I should be able to send you the detailed examples as well. So feed throughs. Okay, feed throughs like basically means that we have certain kind of circuit which we are trying to stage it, like stage, I mean like we have a certain kind of circuit where we want to pipeline it, like a cycle or 2 cycles later based on stages. But then based on how we code, there is again ambiguity there, and then in one case we see a 1 cycle delay, in other case we see a 2 cycles delay. So these are like feed throughs, like we expected the signal to reach the next stage after a cycle, but then it reaches in the same cycle. Okay, how can this happen? Let's see. So in this case, in this example, what we are trying to do here, so we have a D in S1, the stage 1 flop, which takes the input value and then flops it, and then there is a D out from this register, which is driven by the divided clock of, which is based on the clock. Okay, so here is a typo here. This has to be a clock. Just remember this. This has to be clock equal not of clock. So basically that. So with that, if you see, let us try to schedule this in different manners. Okay. Now, if you see, this and these are scheduled with respect to clock, and these are scheduled with respect to clock diff. Correct. Now let us assume. So what would happen? Like during the clock, positive edge of the clock, D in would get sampled, and after a small delay, D in S1 would get updated. Similarly, sorry, this has to be clock underscore diff. So yeah, okay. So now, okay, so when this occurs again, clock diff will also be sampled a previous value, and inverted version would be assigned to this after a small delay. So that's the delay, because the non-blocking assignment happens after a small delay. Basically, we have a start of the time and then the end of the time, in the same time stamp, like time unit. So this happens at the end of the time unit. If you see the simulation region, there is a NBA updates. So this non-blocking assignment gets updated in that region. Now again, this and this can be scheduled in any order. So when this and these are scheduled in any order, like D in S1 update can happen before clock div, or clock div update can happen before D in S1. Let us take an example where D in S1 update happens before clock div. When D in update S1 happens before clock div, and then this happens later, when this happens, we'll see a positive edge, and D in S1 would have received the updated value and then will reach D out immediately. So we see that in a single cycle we see the D out reaching the value of D in. But if you see if you assume the other scenario, like this block gets updated first followed by this, then when this edge occurs, D in S1 is still not updated and will receive the previous value which was D in, and then when this gets updated, this will update the D in S1. So we see a two cycle behavior in that, like a cycle delay. So in one case, D out gets, like D in gets feed, like jumps, D in overshoots and reach D out. In the other case, D out takes a value of registered value of D in S1. So again, there is a ambiguity which, depending on which block would occur, there is a feed through case here. So what we like, generally the clock should not be what you call the clock should not be coded like this, but then like this is for just for demonstration purpose. But if you are modeling a clock path in a test bench or any other case, you have to make sure that the clock paths are using a blocking statement, because if you use a blocking statement, now let us assume the scheduling like behavior. Now if you see, when this edge occurs, D in will get sampled and stored separately somewhere, and at the end this D in S1 will get updated. In the same time stamp, the clock div will get immediately updated, and then this block will get triggered, and then the previous value of D in S1 would get sampled out. At the end of the clock, you will get the updated value of D in S1. So this mimics the behavior in which D out is sampled version of D in S1 and D in S1 is a sampled version of D in. So in this case, even if you schedule in any order, there is no ambiguity as such. And just a note here, again reconfirming that, so this has to be underscore clock div. Here we have not shown the initialization of this clock, but that is assumed, like, yeah. So if you so we have to basically, if you see this is a register and it will be a X at the start of the simulation. So if you see X equal to not of X, then it doesn't make sense. So it has to be assigned, we should have a reset block here, or that reset block should reset this value, or we could have, because this, what I'm saying, this part of code should not even exist in the design. When it is part of the test benches, we could initialize this clock div to a value of 0 from initial as well. Or if you are like, if this is part of design, you should have a reset signal and then appropriately initialize this clock div to a known value. So these are feed throughs. Okay, now this is simple one. We are trying, what we are saying, that D in was getting stage 1, and then D in stage 1 gets updated to stage 2, and similar like that. So if you see this, so this is trying to model a three stage pipeline. By the name, I can, like, we are just assuming that by the name it shows a 3-stage pipeline. So but then, since these are the blocking statements, these assignments happens immediately, and then D out will see a value of D in the same clock cycle. But there are two cases. What if my intention was this, and the other case, what if my intention was not this? So if my intention was not this, and I wanted to have a pipeline of like D out to be updated following a 3-cycle pipe of D in, then we can use a non-blocking statements, and it would mimic the behavior. But what if the line number 16, D in D out, was a huge part of a statement, and then this, so in that case you can still have this kind of statement, and the names would be like temporary signals here, and then that can get assigned here. But then in that case also we recommend D out to be assigned using D out next, and all the combo circuit, whatever you want to write, has to be part of always at star separately, and all the combo part should be separated out. So let us go through simulation and some synthesis mismatch. So what we are trying to say here is, like, we have discussed races previously, and we have also said in RTL we should not use like explicit delays or like wait or initial blocks, and we should also not use initial block to initialize variables within the design. It can be a part of test bench where you want to initialize the design, but if your internal nodes in a design requires a known value, you should have a reset present for your design, and then that reset should clear that node to a known value. So in the last case, if you see what again, so what we are trying to say here is, like, we know this, correct? We know that cell is missing from the sensitivity list, so that is known, and then because this is missing here, the simulation tool will behave as a latch. Now synthesis tool can also behave in a latch, or can give you a warning and then saying that okay, this was trying to infer a latch, but then the behavior looks similar to a mux and I can go ahead and implement a mux. So we have to be careful when we run synthesis to know, so to go through the the logs to make sure that all the inferred registers or combos, like the latches, are actually intended. If not, do have a careful look, because in most likely the synthesis tool will see, okay, based on cell, what I'm trying to achieve here is a mux functionality. If cell is this, d in gets passed on to d out. If cell is 0, then d in 2 gets passed on to d out. So synthesis tool can this infers a mux. I can infer a mux and then I can issue a warning. But again, if you had run a lint is basically a tool. It is the term lint is like generic term we use across software, hardware, everywhere. So it takes your code, analyzes your code for the intent. Now since RTL is the code in which we are analyzing the code for synthesis, it will try to infer the logic for synthesis behavior and try to flag any warnings. So that is RTL lint only, but the lint can be the lint can be used for other purpose as well, for other functionalities like low power, like tracing, CDC, and like the lint itself is a huge topic to discuss. But for the context of this lab, what we are saying, that the lint what we are trying to demonstrate is the RTL lint, which infers the synthesis behavior, and you could have even seen this flag before, even in the lint, without even going to the synthesis. So again, the recommendation here is, if you have a system verilog, use always underscore comp, or if you have verilog, use always underscore like at the rate of star. And then if you're fancy or chances use it like using this, then you can explicitly list. But again, you can list once, but what if you are updating the code again and again and then you miss something? So it's always better to use always at star to use this, yeah, if you're using verilog. So latches, okay. So what are latch? Latch might be intended, you want latch in your design, you might not want in your design. It can be a debatable thing. If you want, so whenever you see a latch inference message from the tool, in this case, if you see, this is like a verilog file. So by looking at always at star, I cannot say that okay, I was intending to infer a latch, or I was intending to infer a combinational circuit. But if you go to system verilog, you can always use always underscore comp or always underscore latch. So when you use always underscore latch, it means that okay, I was intended to infer a latch and I got a latch. So that's fine. So system verilog has construct that allows tools to enforce that intention, like what you're trying to intend. But in case if you're using verilog, there is no way for the tool to know whether you're trying to infer a latch. So whenever you are using always at star and the tool infers this as a latch, it will flag you a warning saying that okay, I have inferred a latch, but you must review whether it was intended or not. Now why is this behavior a latch here? Because if you see d out, a combinational circuit is a should get assigned a value in all cases. Like it's a gate. Even if A changes, B changes, C changes, like if a 3 input gate with A, B, C, whatever changes, the value of the output should be known. And then it doesn't hold a value, like A changes and then B and C changes, but B and C changes will not affect the value. For a gate, it should not happen because it's a combination circuit and it should be updating the value. So in this case, if you see, if enable and load is present, we follow D in. And then there is a in the other case, if enable and load is not present and clear is present, we try to follow clear here, correct? We try to clear this. But what if the enable is present and then these two like branches are not taken? Again, what if the enable itself is not present? We have not assigned a value of D in. This is similar kind of this, like we have tried to model this using a case. Again, this can be basically in the line number 15 can be 11x or the question mark here, because in any case this will, if enable is 1 and load is 1, this D out will follow D in. So this exactly is not the similar representation of this, but you get the idea. What we are trying to show here is that we have not listed the entire branches here. So the moment there is a branch in which we have not updated a value to a combinational signal, it infers a latch. So what can we do? Either we explicitly enumerate all the branch or all the case statements, or we can assign a default value at the before the if or before the case statement. So if you see this, here, what we are trying to do here, we have like there are many ways we can use, like a D out. We have assigned a value of 1 tick B0 before the case, so it gives a if any of these doesn't match, then this gets a value. In case of case, this you can use in the like before the if as well. In case of case, you can use a default statement as well. If the default is present, if any of this like there is a missing specification of that a match, then it will fall back to this default, and then default would take into account. But it is always good if you have a flexibility of using system value constructs, try to use it, because the tool can quickly infer the intent and then flag you violations so that you can fix it. Synchronous resets. Okay, we'll go through some of the resets. So the intention here is to we are trying to clear Q based on low version of like this synchronous reset. So whenever the reset is low, we are trying to clear the value of Q. Now if you see this all behavior will get actually synthesized into the same logic in synthesis, and then it will also behave the same in simulation. So there is no what you call race or ambiguity as such here. But what is the problem here? Like, why are we discussing this then? So the recommended, if you have always seen codes like example codes, you will always see the reset arc being written first, followed by the non-reset arc. So that is the guideline to be followed. You can even write codes like this, but this is not recommended. Okay, why this is not recommended? Let us discuss. So suppose tool doesn't know that your reset, if you're naming it as RST, so it knows that it is a reset. For it is just an identifier. What if this D and the reset N was named E or something else? It doesn't know that this is a reset pin, correct? Now during synthesis, when the tool will try to make a circuit out of this logic, it may choose to infer a flop which has an inbuilt reset, like synchronous reset, or if it doesn't have a standard cell library or standard cells with what you call synchronous reset, then it will try to model something like this, correct? Now in both cases, if the identifier can be named anything, it doesn't know which signal to connect to this, correct? Now tool can infer this if you write in a particular order. If you write in this particular order, it knows that okay, reset has to be, because we have a guideline saying that the reset should be followed like this, correct? But again, this is a guideline, not a what you call enforceable statement. So tool also needs to know if you can specify him what is the reset. let's see the other example. Okay, so in this case again it's clear that when reset is there we want to clear this queue, but again if reset is not there we want to follow like this. So if reset is not there, and of d in data 1 and data 2 is like driven. Now in this case the tool can infer this circuit as well as this circuit. Both are equivalent with respect to behavior, correct? But if you see this reset is present here and not closest to this arc. What the intention of the reset was to, this should be present as close as possible to the first gate of this particular flop. Why that is needed? Because if you see this, we know that reset would never be like, reset should always be driven to a like a known value, a value of 0 or a 1, so that we know that when a reset is driven to a known value as close as possible to this, we know that the value of q will never go x. It will either follow that reset value or a non-resetted value, so whatever that. But in this case, if you see this example, when the reset gets deasserted, somehow the data 1 was x, then this gets so the intention here is tool might not know by the name of the identifier what the reset is. So the guideline is follow this sequence if reset n, and for different synthesis tool there can be different pragmas. Please search pragmas like on the web, you will like be easily do not use all the pragmas, like some pragmas can be misused as well. So what we are trying to say here, for to specify what is the sync reset name of the signal, you can specify a pragma called pragma sync set reset and the name of the signal. If you give that, then irrespective of the way you code, you can code it this way, this way, this way, anyway, it will try to connect the reset pin as close as possible to this flop. Or even if the a flop is available with the synchronous reset pin, that signal will be directly connected to that port. Yeah, so this is the guide recommended, what we say that we, okay, the ordering again can be different based on like how you see it. You may want to place the order of async reset before, then the sync reset, but again please be sure that when one of these is active, the other will get masked out. So because of this, you will see here a name called dominant, because if we have both this and this asserted, then you will only see effect of this and not see a effect of this, even if this is held longer. So that is the case here. You have to be careful with this, because yeah, that may not match or not match your behavior. You can try this example in which you can follow that. You can try 4 combinations where this gets asserted before and this gets asserted later, and the and the vice versa, and the duration of assertion of this reset can call like the, what I'm trying to infer here is if this reset is asserted higher for longer period of time and this reset is asserted for shorter period of time, since the assertion age is gone, we are only looking at labels. Since we are only looking at labels, it might so happen that in one of the case this our intention might not be correct. So be careful with all that scenarios, and then yeah, that's the thing. Thank you. I hope this was useful for you. We'll try to make similar videos like session videos. The next in the agenda is like we'll try to go through the structure of a D flip-flop, try to like break down the D flip-flop, and then try to analyze like where the setup and hold requirement comes from. We'll try to demarcate what is setup time, what is hold time based on the actual circuit level details. We'll try to see how, if there is setup violation, what are the possible fixes. If there are hold violation, what are the possible fixes. We'll also try to analyze like what is the maximum frequency of a circuit, how do we analyze the circuit behavior for timing, and what are the different categories of paths exist, what are feed like what are the register to register path, IO paths, and all kind of things. Thank you.